All right, welcome everyone. It's Tuesday. We're going to do a Rashi from the third Aliyah, and Hanukkah is already in the air. So we're going to do a Hanukkah-related Rashi, which happens to be a Rashi on our Aliyah, but one which is directly related to Hanukkah. So hopefully it will be interesting and start to get us in the mood. So of course, the beautiful parsha, difficult parsha, action-packed parsha. As we mentioned yesterday, Yaakov has to struggle with Yosef and his brothers and the dreams that Yosef has, and he sends Yosef to check on his brothers. Of course, his brothers have other plans, and they want to kill Yosef. The end of the second Aliyah, Reuven comes up with another plan. Vayishma Reuven vayatzigilehu miyadam vayomer lo nakenu nafesh. Reuven, at least at first blush, there's much more to this story behind the scenes, but at first blush, Reuven is the one who takes charge as the Bechor and says, we're not going to kill our brother. Lo nakenu nafesh. We don't like him. Maybe we want to punish him. Maybe we don't want him to continue to bother us, but we're not going to kill him. So he comes up with a different plan. B. Vayomer alehem Reuven al tishpechu dam. Don't spill his blood. Hashlichu to habor hazeh asher bamidbar vayad al tishlechu bo. Throw him into this pit instead. He'll suffer a little bit, but we won't directly kill him. L'man hatzilo to mi'adam le'ashivu elaviv, so that we can be able to save him and then bring him back to our father. So 3 or 4 times within the span of these psukim, Reuven reinforced this time and time again that they do not want to kill him, that the purpose of putting him in the pit is so that he should live, so that he shouldn't die, so that he should be returned to his father over and over, etc. They strip him of his clothes. They tuck off his ketonet hapasim, obviously a symbolic piece of clothing. It was a gesture of his father's love to him and preference to him. And what do? Vayikachu, they take him, vayashlichu oto habora. They throw him into the pit, or the cistern, whatever you want to call it. One can imagine this story much better if you understand Israeli archaeology and the nature of a bore, the nature of a pit and a water cistern. If you've ever been in one or looked at one. V'habor reik ein bo mayim. And the Torah reinforces to us that this pit was empty and there was no water in it. So Rashi asks his famous question over here, which is based on the Gemara in Daf Chaf Beis Amid Aleph in Masechah Shabbos. He says, Habor reik eini odea she'ein bo mayim. If the Torah already said Habor reik, the bore was empty, the cistern was empty, don't I already know that ein bo mayim? Why does the Torah redundantly tell me that there was no water in the pit? The pit is empty. The pit is empty. Obviously, there's no water. Ma tamud lomar ein bo mayim. Why did the Torah repeat or add those words ein bo mayim? There is no water in the pit, to tell us that reik, empty, is all relative. It was empty of the usual substance that was in it, which is water. That's what a bore is used for. Okay, so it has to tell us reik ein bo mayim. But the reik was specifically to tell us ein bo mayim. However, other things might still be contained in there. Mayim ein bo, aval nechashim ve'akravim yesh bo. There was no water in the bore, there was no water in the pit, but there were snakes and scorpions inside this pit. That's what the Torah is coming to tell us by telling us both facts, habor reik and ein bo mayim, a famous Gemara in Masechah Shabbos. So one of the questions that arises on this Gemara Masechah Shabbos is the following. The Gemara presents this drasha of Rav Nassan bar Manyumi Mishmei de Rabbi Tanchum. Rav Nassan bar Manyumi says this in the name of Rabbi Tanchum, right over here. Mai dichsiv aborek ein bo mayim, mimashma shenemar v'borek ein yodea she'ein bo mayim, elamai talmud lomar ein bo mayim ein bo aval nachashim v'akravim yesh bo. The exact drasha that Rashi just quoted. The reason it's quoted here in Masechah Shabbos is because right before it, as oftentimes you have in the Gemara, the same rabbi is mentioned giving another drasha, which is pertinent to the sugya that's being spoken about here in Masechah Shabbos. So just before this, right here on the bottom of Chaf Aleph Amud Beis, Amar of Kahana, Darash Rav Nassan bar Manyumi Mishmei de Rabbi Tanchum. Same person, Rav Nassan bar Manyumi, in the name of Rabbi Tanchum, as the following drasha. Ner shel Chanukah shenicha l'mala me'esrim amma. The Chanukah candles that are placed above 20 amos, very, very high up, psula, kisuka, v'kemavui. They are invalid, just like a sukkah that's above 20 amos, just like a mavui. You just learned Daf Yomi Masechus Eruvin. The alleyway has to have a certain bar that tells you that you're going out into the Rosh Hashanah. If that is more than 20 amos, all 3 of those things, if they're above 20 amos, they are puzzle. They're no good. And then, lo and behold, the same rabbi is quoted with our drasha on the bore. So you'd ask yourself, okay, the Chanukah drasha is very obvious. The whole sugya here is about Ner Chanukah and where you place it and where it's valid and where it's not valid. So one of the halachos that's taught is the halacha of 20 amos. And it's taught in the name of Rashi Bar Manyumi. The question that commentators have on this Gemara is, why do we have the next drasha of Habor Reik Ein Bo Mayim? So the simple answer is because it's in the name of the same person. The Gemara often lumps them together. When you have one statement of a certain Tana or Amora, the Gemara will tell you other statements by the same person because that's the only way the Gemara can get them in. There is no other place for the Gemara to mention it. But the deeper understanding that some have suggested on this Gemara is that there's an intrinsic connection between the two drashas, and actually it might help us to understand the psukim in our parsha a little bit better. Some have suggested that the whole reason why a menorah, Hanukkah candles, cannot be higher than 20 amos is because the whole purpose is pirsume nisa, to publicize the miracle. And if it's higher than 20 amos, your eye doesn't catch it, you might not see it, it won't fulfill the purpose of publicizing the miracle. If that's true, perhaps the reason the next drasha about the pit is appended is to tell us that that pit had shared the same quality with the Ner Chanukah. And that is, it must have been deeper than 20 amos. And if so, they couldn't necessarily see down to the bottom of the pit. And if that is true, the connection of those two drashas is meant to teach us that. It can give us insight into the story in the Parsha, because one of the most obvious questions is, if they were trying to save Yosef's life, as I just showed you, Reuven over and over says, we want to save him, we want to spill his blood, we want to return him to his father, then how could they throw him in a pit that had snakes and scorpions when he would obviously be killed? So the answer could be, based on the Gemara's smichas hadrashos, right, juxtaposition of these two drashas, is the pit might have been very deep, more than 20 amos. If it was more than 20 amos, they couldn't see the bottom, which is exactly the same problem as candles of Hanukkah, which are 20 amos high. Because of that, they thought, oh, it's empty. I see no water in it. That's obvious. Even if it was a 20 amma pit, they would realize there's no water in it. The water would come up very high. But all they could see was Mayim Einbo. But they couldn't see Nachashim V'Akravim Yeshbo. They couldn't see the snakes and the scorpions, which is why they thought throwing him in there would actually save his life. Something interesting to think about. There's a lot more drashas of beauty of that Gemara and of the juxtaposition of those two guys, but I thought it was a good tie-in to our parsha. Hope you have a wonderful day.